tell us your name? Did you live here? Did you die here? Do you want to take a trip? Hi, folks, and we are live coming to you on the World Wide Web thingamajigger internet stuff. Uh, and we're getting some roar. Hi, Selena.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hello.
Good. So
Hello.
glad you made it.
Thank you. Me too.
Haven't seen you in a while. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
Do you have a an outline? Did you get that?
I did. I have it.
Good. Okay. And of course, Lewis is over here. Look at that.
Oh,
After 2 years, I'm finally getting my orientation right. It's got a setting. What's this? It's got a setting on here now that you can mirror your camera. And to me, that just, I've never used it. So that just kind of made it wonky for me. Does that look, I mean, did it flip for y'all?
No.
Oh, never mind
Looks
then.
okay for me.
Well, it's backwards. And when I'd hold up a book, you couldn't read it because it was backwards. So,
Hmm.
anyway, thank you for being here, watchers. Just remember that we provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers, for your entertainment. We are not by any means and do not claim to be scholars and experts on any of the topics we cover. However, I will say that Lewis has already done a lot of research into the hauntings in this particular topic, so he's going to be more of our resident expert today. Okay, but we are simply
Uh-oh. Tom. Uh-oh. Well, let's see. um, I guess I can continue on.
okay.
And please remember, this show
enthusiasts
is
and storytellers who have fun with
Oh,
connection is unstable. Sorry about that, folks.
no
Uh,
problem.
Everybody's got to look at our frozen faces for a few seconds.
Well, it was just you that was frozen.
Oh well, on my end of it, everybody went black. So,
Oh, okay.
which I have some good news. I'm going to share them on that in just a minute.
Okay.
But we're enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. And please remember that this show is live, as you just experienced, and nothing is rehearsed or edited out later. What you see is what you get. The only exception is our revisited shows and our night trek shows. And they are pre-recorded and uploaded. So, Selena, since you haven't been here in a while, what's going on in your world?
Working. All I do is work these days.
Oh
How about
yes,
y'all?
yeah, um,
Pretty much the same for me as well.
Mhm.
yeah.
Work, work,
I
work.
don't. If you get a chance, if you're friends of Lewis or on the Southern Spirit Guide page,
Hmm.
um, find his job. I even hate to call it that because I know it's what you love doing. Troup County Historical Society,
Oh yeah. Okay.
and they post these different things that's going on with the historical society. And Lewis has been on there several times giving little historical lectures and whatnot. one I got to catch was just really cool, and I love
Um, well, I think he was going to mention I did a lecture on a local incident involving a Native American village,
Oh,
which was destroyed in 1793, actually long before the county was even created. So I did an evening lecture on that. But anyhow,
loved it.
I'm not sure if we should move
And
on.
I okay,
There you go.
maybe I'm back.
Welcome back.
Yes, and I think you were going to tell them about the lecture you did.
I did.
Yeah, that was cool. I actually I thought I was getting it on the beginning, but it was only like the last 10 minutes, so I went back and rewatched it again. It was really intriguing. You know, they they thought they were dealing out justice, this band as posse, I guess you'd call it, and they just picked an Indian village at random. They didn't even know if they were the culprits who had been doing the raids and all, and that was just shocking. It's just like, God, the crassness of it. I'm getting a lot of roaring noise. I can hardly hear. Is that
I'm
somebody?
hearing a little bit of roaring, but it's not
I
too
guess
bad.
it's worse because I have my headphones on. Okay, just to explain what's going on, I found out just this week. We went pre-recorded for a while, and the reason we did that was because I had lost trust in my internet provider. But being on the
I guess the internet provider probably got a clue that he was going to speak badly about them, so they decided to slow down his internet.
wow.
We'll wait just a few seconds and see if he
Sure.
comes back.
Okay.
phone, the speed of my
Ah,
okay, I think I'm back again.
welcome
But
back.
well, we had upgraded my internet package a few months ago, but they neglected to tell me I need to upgrade my modem. So I think that's the issue here. So we're going to head in the direction of doing the show. Let's. Can I mute you, Selena? Yes, you're making all kind of noise, woman. Oh, and
Maybe it's your
Lynn.
air conditioning.
Oh yeah, and you don't want to turn that off today. You do not want to turn that off today, because it's 97 in this area today with a heat index of 106. So please keep your AC on. If you want to speak up, just unmute your mic. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna keep you completely cut off, Selena. I'm so glad you're here. But and I just wanted to say, Selena, Lynn said, "Hey, it's been a long time." So, all right. We are going to forge ahead. Lewis, just keep things going
Okay.
if I drop out. Um, but I wanted to say, uh, who caught last week's revisited show? It was part one of our third part of ghost hunting on gadgets called Did You Hear That? Part three, Gadgets, with Darren Huff and Al Luna. And we were talking about, we started our conversation about different ghost hunting tools. So you need to go back and watch that and be waiting for next week, which will be the final completion of that show, part 3B, part two of the part three gadgets. Well, we're in a part three today. So
Hmm.
anyway, they were great guests, telling some great stories. I think it's just uncanny. Darren thought he hit somebody in the road one day, and he gets out and there's nobody there, but he looks up to see this short, portly man with a black top hat running off into the cornfield.
How strange.
How strange. And then to find out that there have been other reports in that area of a short, portly man in a black top hat. So
I'm just trying to imagine this short, fat man trying to run away.
Well, I asked him, I said, did you feel a bump when your car, when he said, no. He said, I just saw him there for a second and slammed on my brakes. And he said, I thought I'd run him over. But when I got out, I see him running off into the cornfield. But I told Andrea, she was on the show, and I was like, Andrea, we missed somebody on our Hat Man show. Beware the black hat. So we've got to go back into Ohio and dig up this short fat man with a tall top hat. So that was pretty cool. And last night on Night Treks, how many of you got to see that? It was
I had just gotten back from my tour, unfortunately.
Yeah. It was a different one. Selena, have you seen it yet? Okay. It was different. Usually Night Treks is our dark side of our storytelling, but last night was just strange with a twist. It was a strange love story, and this was what we had somebody comment. I posted our YouTube site on a couple of paranormal sites today, and somebody commented on this, and I took a screenshot of it. She says, I just listened to the one about Basin Road just as a sample of your work. Oh my goodness, this is great. So thank you. And I hope you're watching, because I sent her an invite to watch the show today. And so hopefully she's watching the live version of our show. But go back and check last night's Night Trek called It's About Time. And I'll tell you straight up, it's the longest Night Treks we've done. It came in a little over 20 minutes. But it was it's actually only the tip of the iceberg. I'll tell you, you hear that story, and each little segment of it, you're like, oh, there's so much more to this. You're only getting just the little pieces of it, but each section, you're like, there's so much more. But to really tell the story would take a book, and so be watching for that. And next Night Treks, who knows? It's usually a week. I want Lewis to tell some of his stories, so hopefully we can get him online and recording some of these soon. Okay. All right. And if you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do.
Click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, what he said. I got a little gauge over here.
Haircut just gets me every time.
Well, he doesn't have it now. It's grown out since then. But like I said last show, he'd spent the weekend with us, and we took him to get his haircut, and that's what he asked for. So he got what he asked for. But if you are watching and if you've liked and subscribed, we do appreciate it. Thank you. Please share. Let people know about our YouTube channel. And if you could help us produce this show, we'd certainly appreciate it. Yes, and we thank you to the ones that are supporting us, the patrons that are on there. We appreciate it. And with all the different levels, you get different things. And if you're a patron on there, please know that you can come on this show at any time. Just let us know when you'd like to be on with us. Now, another way you can support us is our Strange Journeys stuff at strangestuff.live. Uh, you can get coffee mugs, T-shirts, stickers. There's a tumbler, hats, and I just found or found these. Excuse me. I just remembered these today. We have our pint glasses,
Ooh.
and if you're a watcher, you can have a pint glass. And while you're drinking your pint at the pub, um, and you can use one of our glasses. We've got them in Strange Friends and other things. All right, we're going to get on into the show. Our first Strange Highways show, we had
Uh-oh. Okay, I'm quickly trying to remember what our first Strange Highway shows was about. Um,
so
and
much material, we had to split it into two. I mean, we're talking time loops, vortexes, sightings. Okay. Well, our first Strange Highway show was about all different kinds of stuff. We just covered the gamut. We had to split it in shows because we had so much material. And this is the first Strange Highways show. We're going to focus one highway. We have some plans for some other highways, but this is our first one. Lewis brought this up. He's written a blog about it, and I told him it sounds like we need to do another Strange Highways show. But let's get started. Today, we travel the strange highway of US 29 that stretches from Pensacola, Florida to a suburb on the outskirts of Baltimore, Maryland. Correct?
yes,
Okay. Our own E.T. Lewis has researched the hauntings on this unusual stretch of road, and most of our show today comes from his blog at Southern Spirit Guide, the article, The Terror.
that article is The Terrors of US 29, a ghost tour. And it looks like we are actually using this article as our outline today, and we found several strange things along the way.
Oh,
Um, Now, okay, since we still don't
okay.
have Tom. Oh, there he
I'm back
is.
now. I do
Okay.
apologize, folks. We're trying to remedy this, and with the next few 2 or 3 days, I'll be increased speed and upgraded my modem. So hopefully by the next show, we won't have these issues because my modem is too small. Don't you hate it when they tell you that? Uh, yes, Lewis, I heard you say we're going to be using your article primarily as a guideline, but I
Hmm.
found a few other things. Uh,
Okay.
and that weren't actual ghost hunting. So we're going to start by allowing Lewis to introduce us to US 29.
Well, like Tom said, US 29 stretches from downtown Pensacola to Ellicott City, Maryland, which is a suburb of Baltimore. And along its way, it passes through part of Alabama, including the cities of Troy and Auburn. It passes into Georgia and passes right through my hometown of LaGrange. And in fact, I'm sitting not far from where 29 passes right through town. Um, After passing through LaGrange, it passes through Atlanta and then Athens, Georgia. It heads into South Carolina and crosses through Greenville and Spartanburg and Gaffney, and then into North Carolina, where it passes through Charlotte. It passes through Raleigh, and then passes into Virginia. In Virginia, it passes through Lynchburg and Danville and Charlottesville and eventually Arlington, where it crosses the Potomac into Washington, D.C. From Washington, D.C., it heads to the suburbs of Washington in Maryland and then eventually terminates near Ellicott City. Now, this was among the very first highways that was proposed by the federal government in 1923.
Wow. Wow.
And of course, they've added these highways through the years, and they've also tweaked the original routes. And originally, I think the road only went to North Carolina, but then was eventually extended all the way up to Maryland. And the reason I chose to write about this, number one, I have a fascination with roads. It's kind of strange, but when you start to look at all of the variety of places that are linked by this single road, it becomes really fascinating. But also, I have a personal connection. I said that I'm sitting not far from US 29,
Right.
but I came to realize that a large portion of my life, and this is a picture of 29 as it is just about to cross Lafayette Square here in downtown LaGrange. Um, I'm actually sitting not far to the right of that photograph.
Wow.
Um,
Cool.
so anyhow, I've discovered that really a lot of my life has kind of centered on this road. I've lived beside 29.
Wow.
I was living beside 29 when I wrote the article, and I have since moved, and I'm still living next to US 29, just in a different portion of the
Awesome.
city.
Awesome.
I've also worked near and actually on US 29 several times. I grew up in a church that's right next to 29. So
Wow.
that I have a lot of personal connection to this
Right.
as well. But to me, it's just the fact that there are so many uh, marvelous places and places that have ghosts and hauntings
Right.
and other types of activity that this road passes through. So I thought it would be interesting to highlight and look at how all of these places are connected by a single road.
Yes, and I think that's amazing. As I've gone through your article, it's almost like a travel log, a paranormal travel log. If someone wanted to do a road trip, so
Mhm.
let's kind of we don't have time, obviously, to go through everything that he put. Plus, I've added a few extras on here that weren't ghosts; they were some sightings. But I want to start in Pensacola because we have a
Mhm.
connection there with Dagny. And so, Lewis, I had picked out the Sanger, but it's not technically on 29, though, is it?
No, the Sanger Theater is actually located just a few blocks from where US 29 starts in downtown Pensacola.
Right.
But the US 20, sorry, the Sanger Theater is known as the Grand Dame of Palafox Street, and it
Yes.
was literally built from ruins. Um, when the Pensacola Opera House was destroyed in 1917 in a hurricane, they actually took the bricks and many of the fittings and put
Wow.
them back together to create the Sanger Theater. And the theater opened in 1925 as a venue for live performances as well as film. And Broadway shows, vaudeville has been performed there. And the first film to, excuse me, open the theater was Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments.
Oh, wow.
So it thrived as mostly as a cinema for many decades until competition from many of the local large screen theaters began to kind of to cause business to go down. Um, the theater closed in 1975, but then several years later, it was reopened as a cultural center, and the theater has seen one extensive renovation, and that was in 1996. So it seems that with all of the crowds that have passed through this theater over the many years, that there is some spiritual residue left, and people have heard voices, and
Wow.
it also seems that many of the electrical circuits have been affected by the
Really?
ghosts. There was one incident where electricians working on a touring show, they were hanging and adjusting the lights for the show, and the lights suddenly began to flash erratically on their own.
Wow.
And they blamed this activity on the spirit of a former worker who supposedly passed away when the boiler in the basement exploded.
Oh, wow.
Um, but as for the actual identity of the spirit, they don't really know.
Well, Lynn had a question. When was that picture taken? The one that we showed?
I don't know. It was probably I probably put the date on my blog because I recognize that
Yes.
as being a picture I used,
Right.
but I don't know exactly when that picture was
Okay.
taken. It was probably within the past 20 years, maybe.
Right. Right. All right. And also in Pensacola, Old Christ Church.
Hmm.
Is that it? I know it said something about the old Pensacola Village. Is that like a historical district?
Yes, yes, it is a it I don't think it's a living history village, but it is a collection of historic buildings which have been restored. There's also a house nearby called the Door House, and
Hmm.
all of these buildings have their own sets of ghosts. At the Old Christ Church, um, there are the spirits of three vicars who once served in the church, and they have been seen several times. And in one case, there was a service where they actually reburied the remains of the vicars. And
Hmm.
during that service, one of the attendees actually saw the vicars appear in
Wow.
the church among the crowd.
Wow. Wow. And actually, they appeared to them or just saw them?
They just saw them walking amongst
Wow.
the other guests.
Wow. And this was during their reburial, right?
Yes, a service marking their reburial. They evidently their graves had been exhumed because they were doing
Uh-huh.
renovations on the church, and they had to rebury their remains. So they had a whole service, and the spirits of the three men.
Just showed up. Say,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you. We appreciate the respect, you know. All right. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Showing up for
Mhm.
their own funeral. In a sense. In a
Yes.
sense. All right. We're moving up the road to Troy, Alabama.
Hmm.
Um,
And
uh,
Troy is home to Troy University. Troy University is the first, or one of the firsts of many major educational institutions that US 29 passes. Out of Troy, it'll also pass by Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama, LaGrange College here in LaGrange, Georgia, Emory University in Atlanta, the University of Georgia in Athens. Um, it'll also pass through several colleges and universities, including Furman and Wofford, colleges in Spartanburg, South Carolina. It'll pass by the whole research triangle, which includes Raleigh, North Carolina, and that includes a number of major institutions, as well as the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. and also Virginia Military Institute uh,
Oh
in
yeah.
Lynchburg, Virginia. So it passes by all of these universities, and it kind of ties them all together very nicely, which makes for a very interesting conversation, especially when you're looking at all of the ghosts at these colleges and
Yes.
universities.
Well, I know it was or on stage, call it on stage. I don't know now, but our haunted theater. You talked about the haunted theater at Auburn University.
Yes, the haunted theater at Auburn University, and the theater at one point was housed in an old Presbyterian church that is just across 29 from Sanford Hall, which is one of the major university buildings that sits there right on 29. And this church is it was probably built in the 1840s. I'm not exactly looking at my notes, but hopefully there's Tom. Yes.
This is crazy. I'm so sorry, folks. Uh,
It's fine. I'll just continue. Um, but the university chapel, which it is has been converted to now, did house a theater for many years, and the students became very familiar with the spirit of who they
we're
believed to
still going on.
be
Yes, you're the man.
a Confederate soldier who died while the building was serving as a hospital during the Civil War. And the students always knew that the spirit could be appeased by leaving a pack of M&Ms up in the
Right. I
rafter
love
of
that.
the theater, and they would leave those M&Ms before every production. If they didn't, the spirit would somehow mess with the actors or mess with the props or do something to
Wow.
possibly interrupt the theater. So anyway, when a new theater building was constructed some years ago, they ended up leaving directions for the spirit to get to the new theater, and it is known that the spirit possibly traveled to that theater, but he actually is believed to travel between both of the buildings, and because there is activity in the new theater and
Yeah.
also the old chapel as well.
Wow. so they so they moved on with them, and that's
Yes,
cool. but
yes,
but some
indeed.
of them didn't want to go. They wanted to stake around. Tell us
Oh yeah.
about Pace and Shackelford Halls before we.
Okay, to go back to Troy University in Troy, Alabama, these are two halls built in the early 20th century, and they're both residence halls. And both of these halls have experienced
Go in.
poltergeist activity. Um, there is also the legend of a student who possibly committed suicide in her room. She was depressed after her fiance went off to fight in probably World War II, and she ended up hanging herself in the building after he was killed in the war. And there is a story that two female students living in one of the dorm rooms walked in one afternoon to see two pins actually levitating in midair. Um, and the following day, both of the young ladies moved out of their rooms, having been totally freaked out. So there was another experience where a group of terrified girls witnessed a paperclip tapping on their window from the outside, and things inside their room moving around on its own. And supposedly, the university has had the room cleansed to hopefully settle the activity, though students still encounter activity throughout the rest of the building.
They think it all started with a Ouija board.
It that could be a likely source, especially with these young college students who really don't have an understanding of the fact that Ouija board is not something you really mess with for fun,
Right.
and possibly brought something through.
Right. Well, on our show Gadgets, did you hear that from last week? We played part one of part three. A commenter made the statement that
Another statement in silence. Oh, okay. Um, However, we can move on. Um, Out of Alabama, out of Auburn, Alabama, um, US 29 passes on into the state of Georgia.
ghost hunting, they're there.
And then it
Yes.
passes.
uh, I was saying about the Ouija board, when they go ghost hunting, you're trying to communicate with what's already.
Mhm. Tom. Okay. Let's see. So
With
after
Ouija
passing,
board, you're inviting something.
all right. Well, I think we can move on into Georgia. Um, so after heading into Georgia, US 29 passes through my hometown, and I should probably, excuse me, um, let me tell you a little bit about the house where I lived on 29. I lived in a house with a number of roommates, and I was also living there with my partner. And one evening, I came home and I was expecting my partner to be there. And so I walked through the front door. And after entering the front door, I, um, I walk in and the living room is dark. Now, with so many roommates that I was living with, it was very unusual for me to come home and not have anyone else there. So I looked for my partner and looked in the bedroom, and as he wasn't there, so as I was crossing back into the living room, I noticed the kitchen light is on, and I could hear someone in the kitchen just kind of rummaging around in the cabinets. And so I thought, well, I'll just go find out who's in the kitchen. So I started my way across the living room, and I got about halfway through the living room, and all of a sudden the noise in the kitchen stops and the light turns off. So a few seconds later, I walk into the kitchen and there is no one there. So I checked in the back room off the kitchen. I checked in the living room off the kitchen, and there was no one else there. I just assumed it was one of my roommates and they had gone back in their bedroom. And so I went on with my night, and I'm sitting in my living room hours later, and my roommates come home, and I said, "Well, how long have y'all been gone?" "Oh, we've been gone all day." And at that point, I realized I was totally home alone. And I don't know who it was that was making all of that noise in the kitchen and turned the light off. But this all happened in the house where I was living, that was on 29, just south of Lagrange.
Wow. And I've been in and out. So have you mentioned your tour, Strange Lagrange, yet?
No, no. I do
Okay.
host a walking tour, the Strange Lagrange tour. We're just about to go on a summer hiatus,
Ooh, yeah, it's
but we
hot.
will start back up in September. but this tour happens every Friday night at 7 p.m. and starts out from the Legacy Museum here on Main Street. And we do walk um, along parts of 29 and cross
Wow.
29 as a part of the tour. And there are a number of haunted places on or near 29 here in downtown. So we visit
Cool.
many of those locations.
Excellent. So if you find yourself on Highway 29 going through LaGrange on Friday nights,
Yes.
well, not now. Well, I remember when we were doing those tours down here, which that reminds me, it was 7 or 8 years ago we were doing the tours. Where did I put it? Yeah, there it is. There's a local paper that does like awards for things in town. And I just got this pop up on my Facebook memories today. We were nominated
Oh, wow.
as the best place to take out of towners, and we're up there with the big dogs like the Battleship, Richards DAR, the Carnival Museum, Bellingrath, Five Rivers Delta. I mean, those are big places that's been around a long time, and we made the nominations.
Wow.
We didn't win. I mean, because by that at that point we were pretty new, but we made the nominations. And I remember during our summer tours, we would have a cooler sitting on the tailgate of my Suburban full of bottles of water. We gave those out before the tours. Before I get cut off again, we're going to journey up the road a good bit to um, Lynchburg.
Okay.
February 8th, 2020, as reported by Crypto Crew Research. This person says, reported to them, I was traveling west on Virginia 24 past Callahan Road. It's about 5 miles from the village of Rustburg. I found a map of it. If you'll look how close it is to 29. And this, if you see where 29 is and where that green box is in the white circle, he was headed towards 29 when he saw this. He said, I saw a being of some sort that was very tall, chocolate to dark cinnamon color, run across the road with only no more than 2 long strides. It was huge. I slowed down to get another look, but it jumped the guardrail and was gone from sight. I saw nothing. Another car was coming in the opposite direction and had to have seen it also. Then when they were investigating, they went back and took this picture, that this was the probable location of this sighting, right off of US 29 in Lynchburg. Well, if you saw 29 on that picture, I'll put it back up here. As you go up toward the top, that's heading into Lynchburg. And the road that the sighting on to the right goes to Rustburg. So it's right in that area there, right off of 29. Tell us a couple of things in LaGrange. You mentioned the tours. Tell us some of the haunted stories there.
Well, I could talk about the building that I'm sitting in at the moment. This is the archives building. It is it was built in 1917 as a bank and served as a bank
Wow.
and office building for many, many years until it was eventually purchased by a local foundation and renovated for use as a historical society and archives. So the building was built, like I mentioned, it had a bank on the first floor, and then it had office space on the 2 floors above it. And the offices that were originally here were the offices of the Callaway Mills. This was a company formed by Fuller E. Callaway Sr., who was a local industrialist who built a number of mills here in town. And eventually, those mills came together to form the Callaway Mills. And he had his offices in this building. And I'll tell you this very brief story. We have had two paranormal investigations in this building, and the most recent happened in last December.
Wow.
And this group that investigated was comprised of a number of people who were sensitives. And the guy who was kind of in charge of the group was also a sensitive. And just before we actually held the investigation, we all sat down and had dinner together. And during the course of dinner, he turns to me and he says, "I've had visitors." So I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, frequently before and sometimes even after I investigate a location, I will have visits from some of the spirits who may reside in that location." And he said they frequently appear to me when I'm by myself. So if I'm driving or maybe taking a shower, I can sometimes encounter these spirits. He went on to say, "I was taking a shower and I turned around and there's this gentleman standing there. And the gentleman looked at me and said, 'I understand you're going to be visiting my former offices, and I want to tell you that I'm absolutely delighted.'" And the man holds up his hand, and he is very clearly wearing a pinky ring. And he puts his hand down and he says, "Bring champagne." And then he vanishes. So the leader of this group gets he immediately contacts one of his researchers, and they start going through our archives photo collection.
Right.
They actually found a photograph
Wow.
of this gentleman, and
Oh
it was
man.
none other than Fuller E. Calloway Sr. And he is very clearly wearing a pinky ring. But most incredibly, there's a whole story about the pinky ring. There's no way this psychic would have known this story, but Mr. Calloway wore this pinky ring, which had been his mother's engagement ring that she had given him on her deathbed, and
Wow.
he for the rest of his life wore it as a pinky ring. So the fact that he appeared to this psychic in his shower and said, "Bring champagne," which is, possibly something he could have said. We do know that he was definitely a man of taste.
Yeah.
He built a magnificent mansion that is also on 29,
Wow.
and that mansion is now open as a house museum, and there are several stories about people smelling the odor of cigar smoke throughout
Oh
the
wow.
house. And he was known to smoke cigars, as most gentlemen of that period did, but it is very strange that they're still encountering his cigar
Yes.
smoke after he died in, I believe it was 28 or 29. So he's been dead almost 100 years.
Wow. I only have one question.
Okay,
Did he bring champagne?
we did. And we used it as a trigger object.
There you go.
We had a bottle of champagne and a cigar, and we put them on a metal tray and connected the metal tray with
Uh-huh.
a device that if those items were touched, then it would go off, and it
Right.
started going off.
Oh,
It
amazing.
was really amazing. And this was also, we set it up on Mr. Calloway's desk, which
Nice.
is in one of my colleagues' offices.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yes. And also here right outside my office, we set up a video camera, and we captured a male voice saying, "I like the bald one." So hopefully they
Excellent.
like me.
Yes. Well, that's like we were ghost hunting one night and the spirit box came out and said Tom did it. And,
Uh-oh.
and I was like, well, probably, but I don't know which one you're talking about.
Yes.
I've been accused of a lot. Okay, I want to do some more sightings, but let's
Okay.
jump to Atlanta first.
Okay.
Um, I visited Stone Mountain years and
Mhm,
years ago. It had to have been back in the 80s, and had a spectacular laser light show at that time.
mhm.
But tell us some of the manifestations there.
Well, Stone Mountain, which is a what is called a monadnock, it is a huge dome of exposed granite,
Right,
and so it's just this solid stone mountain that looks like just a huge rock
right,
just sitting in the middle of the landscape. Um, in the 20th century, they did carve the images of three Confederate generals on the side of the mountain, and
right.
that was carved by and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it was the same artist who would go on to create Mount Rushmore.
Right.
Um, but anyhow, the uh, the local Native Americans believed that this was a very spiritual site, and there have been some ghost sightings on the mountains. I've written about one, but I can't remember the particular details. But as it was set up as an amusement park more in the middle of the 20th century, um, I think it was probably in the 70s, they installed a southern plantation, and they brought all of these historic buildings from all over the state together there adjacent to the mountain. And they have opened them as kind of a living history exhibit.
Right.
And it turns out that many of these buildings actually came with their own ghosts. I do remember there is one building where there is a young man who has been seen crying sitting on the stairs, and
Wow.
visitors and staff alike have experienced that. And if I remember correctly, I believe the Ghost Hunters from Ghost Hunters, the television program,
He who must not be named.
investigated. No, we're
Oh,
we're not
okay.
talking about Zach. No,
No, he said
sorry,
it.
sorry. Um, but the more respectable ghost hunters on
Yes.
television,
Okay.
they
Jason
investigated.
Hawes, the
Yes,
plumbers. Yeah.
yes, Jason and Grant, and
Right.
they investigated the plantation and did come up with some really interesting evidence.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
All right. And we probably should have saved this for our next theater show, but the Fox Theater in Atlanta.
The Fox Theater was actually constructed as a Shriner's Temple originally,
Oh, wow.
and it's built in this fantastic Moorish style. So when you actually enter into the theater itself, you look up and there is this blue dome. So it looks like you're sitting out under an open sky. They have
Wow.
stars, little twinkling lights in the ceiling, and they actually
Cool.
used the bottles, old Coca-Cola bottles, to create the glass on some of the stars. So some of them have a greenish tint, um,
Wow.
which of course is not to be unexpected in the city that gave us Coca-Cola.
Well, true.
But anyhow, the Fox Theater uh, is fairly well known to be haunted. I took a ghost tour there several years ago. It was a fantastic ghost tour. It turns out that they have Civil War soldiers. They have members of the family that once lived on this property. The people who were living there during the Civil War, they remain in the
Wow.
building, as well as perhaps the spirits of various actors and maybe even some audience members who have returned to the theater. But during the course of the tour, we were on an elevator. This is a freight elevator in the back of the building. And we were using the freight elevator, and several people standing next to me felt someone touching them on their back as we
Wow.
were riding up on the elevator. And several people were kind of like, "Excuse me." And, they were all looking around to see who was touching
Who
them.
was
And
touching
they
each?
realized that there was no one adjacent who would have touched them. And
Wow.
so we thought that perhaps that was some of the activity taking place in our group.
Oh, wow. All right. Before we move on up the road, let's go back to a couple of places.
Okay.
Now, arcgis.com actually has a map, and I'd have to go back and look again, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but it's arcgis.com or however you want to say it. But they have a map with sightings, and I followed US 29 and found a couple of these. But the only thing I have criticism is they put no dates, no times.
Mm.
So, but they listed all of these along US 29, 3 lights in the sky over Troy, Alabama, a gray stationary object over the Tucker area in Decatur, Georgia,
Hmm.
a green fireball with an orange tail following it seen over Charlotte, North Carolina. A Lynchburg, Virginia orb seen on Simon's Run and Memorial by witnesses, and about 10 minutes into the new year, again, they didn't say which new year, a slow-moving orange ball of light was observed with no sound, nor was there any flashing lights. And 3 red lights in a diagonal line rose in the sky, vibrated, then went out, and 3 amber orbs forming a triangle, then a straight line, before disappearing in Charlottesville, Virginia. Now, those are some lights seen in the sky over US 29. Now, I know US 29 is not a straight line, if you'll remember. That's what it looks like. But with all this activity, kind of makes you wonder, could it be anybody? A
A
ley
haunted
line.
highway.
Well, a
Oh,
haunted highway, yes, but a ley line.
yes.
We may have some connections there. Now I know I did. Oh gosh, that just really clicked in my head. There is a ley line that goes through Mobile and up through Washington D.C. So that's probably it's called the Arcadian Ley. That's probably what's going on here because it looks like US 29 basically parallels it up the east because it cuts
Mhm.
off. The straight line is from Mobile. It goes through Washington and Baltimore and actually crosses the northern Atlantic. And this lay that Mobile is on actually goes through Stonehenge all the way down into Beirut. But it's one straight line across the globe. Yeah, I know that doesn't compute because we think in the globe.
Yeah.
We think in like a flat map, but it actually.
Mhm. I think we've lost Tom again.
In curving over it and I
Okay.
follow. Yeah.
Is he back? Tom? Okay. So, moving out of Atlanta, um, we do have, um, we'll just head into Athens, Georgia. And Athens, Georgia is, of course, the home to University of Georgia. And the University of Georgia, being as old as it is, I believe it dates to 1785. The University of Georgia has an extremely old campus. There are more than several antebellum buildings on the campus, as well as quite a few more modern buildings. But there is also a very old family cemetery that's located right on campus. It's right next to one of the art buildings, I believe, and it's called the Jackson Street Cemetery. Hello, welcome back.
Man, this is great. Or we'll just do a couple more stories and then we'll call it a day. We're running
Okay,
an hour. This has been frustrating, and I hope we'll be corrected by next show. What were
all
you in
right.
the middle of telling?
I was talking about the Jackson Street Cemetery on the campus of UGA in Athens.
Excellent.
And this cemetery, it's a very old cemetery. And in fact, I've heard stories that for years the university tried to have it moved, but they have to have permission from all of the family members, and they're unable to find family members for some of the people buried there. So the university has not been able to move this cemetery, but there are all kinds of creepy stories about the cemetery. And then there is another much larger cemetery located right behind Sanford Stadium, and that is a Coney Hills Cemetery, and it's also a cemetery with a good deal of creepy activity. I can't think of any of the real specifics off the top of my head, but I can tell you Athens is a fabulous town with many old buildings, all of which have some wonderful ghost stories.
Nice. Well, all right. I wanted to get to one before we close. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we can get through this
Okay.
one. I'm going to try to give an abbreviated version, but we're going back to Lynchburg.
Okay.
We may have to go back and do a story on a show on Lynchburg because
Okay.
we've had several lights in the sky. I think the Bigfoot sighting was in Lynchburg. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So we may have to go back and focus on Lynchburg at one point. But this Crypto Crew research actually had a lot of good information because they have this map. A lot of the times there wasn't a lot of detail, but a couple times there was. And this one in Lynchburg's, this man works for a logistics company, and he works the night shift. And so he can usually see his wife and kids before they go to school. But he was coming home, and it was cold, but not
All right. Well, I guess I'll take over. Um, the man said, I work for a logistics
still
company.
dark.
Okay, I
Okay.
was just going to
Go
start reading
ahead.
it.
Go ahead.
All right.
That way it'll get completed.
Okay. I work for a logistics company, and as we are a 24-hour operation, I usually work the graveyard shift, which means I can be home in the morning to see my wife and children before they leave for the school bus. I live in an area just southwest of Dalesville, close to Highway 81. At the time, it was cold, not cold enough for snow, but there was an icy feel to the air. I finished work around 5:30 in the morning, and it was still dark out. It takes me around 35 minutes to get home if the roads are clear, and that morning I didn't see but 4 cars on the whole route. Just past the diner is a small lake surrounded by trees and shrubs. Not really a forest as such, just a scrap of woodland, but big enough if you wanted to stretch your legs after a long drive or a meal at the diner. Across the way, there is a huge natural reserve with campgrounds and a much larger lake. As I was driving, I saw something lying along the road way further up the road. I thought it was a moose or a brown bear as it was huge, and this made me nervous. A moose in Virginia, really? Um,
It
it
was that
was
big.
it was half on the roadway with its feet pointing into the woods. I slowed down as much as I dared, trying to get a really good look at it. I wish I had just kept my eye on the road ahead. As I passed, I saw what appeared to be a wolf of some kind. It looked like it was ailing or something. Rabid, maybe? It was just laying there in the open and looking down the road as if I didn't exist. Its hair and fur was wet and patchy. It skin was gray in color, and even as I registered it was not a wolf or any kind of dog, I realized it had no tail. The
Wow.
face had a snout, not like a bear, but more like a coyote, a long, thin snout. It had froth around its mouth and nostrils, and its eyes were sickly and yellow. This all took place in a split second, and I could still see it in the rearview mirror. I was too rattled to stop the car and turn around or go back. I thought I would hear from one of the locals that a wolf had been seen dead in the highway. I didn't say anything when I got home. I wasn't sure what to say. I was certain that the thing had no tail. It had a weird look about it, even down to the legs, which almost seemed human. One arm was outstretched. I decided it was a wolf that had been hit by a truck or it had been shot clean. I thought about that wolf every day for weeks. I dreamt about it a bunch. That day, I had run into town with the wife, and as we passed that spot, I wanted to shut my eyes tight. Luckily, there was nothing on the road. Had I imagined the whole thing, that I was almost asleep at the wheel? This that is easier for me to deal with because I think it was a werewolf. And I should also probably say that wolves died out here in the southern United States right around the turn of the 20th century. So it would not have likely been a wolf. Tom? Oh, wow. I guess we've lost Tom again. So, Selena, do you have any final thoughts?
I think all this is very fascinating. It's very interesting, and I'd like to look more into this kind of stuff. It does sound like he saw a werewolf, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
having a pinky ring, seeing that perfectly,
Hmm.
uh, that's pretty amazing. I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it would probably be extremely frightening to see something like that
Yeah.
sitting in the middle of the road, especially if it almost has a human yet
Hmm.
canine appearance. Um, but I think it does go to show that um, definitely US 29 has a lot of activity, and I have come to believe that perhaps if um, if you really look into most US highways like this, in this manner, looking closely at all of the paranormal sightings, I think you could probably find just as much activity on virtually any road. I think paranormal activity is really everywhere, and not just on the side of major U.S. highways.
Yeah.
All right. I agree with that, whatever you said.
Yes, yes. We were just giving our final thoughts.
Yes. Uh, I'll give mine and we'll call it a day. And thank you for your patience. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Are we still connected? I feel like I was getting nervous now, I guess.
Oh,
um, we are going to have to revisit the haunted highways again. This US 29 has been intriguing. That last one that we found, like in Lynchburg, we may have to do a
mhm.
show. The guy thinks he saw a werewolf. Was it a werewolf? Who knows? But it just enamored him and stuck with him. But guys,
Oh, we've lost Tom again.
thank
Oh,
y'all so much.
wow.
States, Tennessee. Okay. All right. We were going to do Strange States, Tennessee, but Tommy in Tennessee has moved to North Carolina or South Carolina. I'm sorry. And so
Okay.
we'll probably do South Carolina. We'll see. But guys, thank you so much, Lewis. Thank you for hanging in there. Selena, thank you for being back with us. We appreciate everything. Guys, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Stay safe on your strange
All right.
journeys out there.